character of YB Lovat is not in Neil Gaiman's novel. He was created so Coraline would not have to talk to herself, and so that she would have a friend her own age. Because in the story, it's all from her perspective, and she's talking to herself.
Wow. That's wild.
However, in the novel, she is told about a family that used to live in the apartment complex, and that family's name was Lovat. So they did take inspiration from the fact that his family used to live there.
Yes, and that there's a deep history about that, too.
Over 130 sets were built across 52 different stages at the studio, spanning 183,000 square feet.
Jesus.
The 52 different stages were the most ever developed for deployed for a stop-motion animated feature.
And boy, were they some beautiful sets. Gorgeous fucking sets.
That would have been amazing to walk through there and see, like, the scenes, outside the range of where the camera was picking up, like how they looked in reality. That would have been so cool.
Well, if you ever head over to my side of the world, Oregon has a museum of sorts. It's pretty much called a Coraline Museum. And I think they have some of the sets. But, like, I was watching some of the BTS, if you will, like the kids are saying, behind the scenes. And the sets were like, I could probably lay down in one of the sets. I probably damaged some of the things. But they're so big. It fits, like, my body. Like, where it would sit. So it would sit at desk level. So probably from, like, my torso level and up. And it would definitely be taller than me.
Okay, that makes sense. That way they can move the puppets from whichever beneath, whatever they need to do to make the scene work out. Okay.
Yeah, so it was just, I had never done a deep dive like that before to know all this information. But, like, even knowing it now, it makes you appreciate it even more. Like, the effort that was put into it, so...
Well, the amount of effort they put into this is just ridiculous.
Yeah.
I mean, and it's in the trivia, at least some of the stuff is.
Yeah.
The on-screen snow was made from super glue and baking soda.
Oh, my God. That's pretty cool.
There were 24 different puppets of Coraline used in the making of the movie. Each one took 10 individuals 3 to 4 months to make.
Oh, my God.
24 different puppets, and each one took 10 people 3 to 4 months to make.
Oh, my God.
Initially, the film was going to be live action, and Dakota Fanning was actually going to be physically portraying Coraline. When it was decided instead to make it a stop-motion animated film, Fanning was asked if she would still be interested in providing Coraline's voice. She said yes, and she thought it would be more, fun to do, and grew even more excited when she saw what Coraline was going to look like in the movie.
Yeah, I mean, Coraline doesn't look anything like the book, so they came up with her own style. And I just can't think of anything else that would have worked.
Yeah, it's hard to imagine anything else because they made it so iconic looking after the fact.
Do you think they could get away with doing a live action Coraline?
They're going to at some point. You know how this shit happens.
Yeah.
Like, I mean, there's going to be a point, if it's not 10 years, 15, whatever it is, where the people who grew up on Coraline, like your daughter's generation, are going to be in movies, and they're going to be like, you know what movie I love? Coraline. Let's make fucking live action of that. It's going to happen.
Yeah, I just hope that it's good. Let's
hope that Disney doesn't make it, because they don't make live action that well.
No, they need to make it an actual horror film. And not only that, but they need. So Dakota Fanning could have played the live action Coraline based off the book cover. I mean, it's not an actual match. The art used in the Coraline book is very abstract, so obviously it's not going to look like a real person. But she would have made a good live action version of it.
Speaking of that abstract thing, something I noticed in the movie is there's a scene where Coraline's looking up at, like, maybe her ceiling or something, and she sees what looks like Starry Night. Did you notice that?
Yes, this is the first time I noticed that.
Yeah, I didn't notice it till this time either, and that also looks amazing, by the way, going back to the visuals. But it's just kind of cool because it looks just like Starry Night, just done in like a a stop motion version, which is cool.
Fucking impressive. They did that intentionally. Well, obviously everything's intentional, but the thing that throws me off about it is that it's at the end. It's when the ghost children are there. Starry Night was considered to be a dream because apparently, why am I blanking on the fucking artist? Vincent Van Gogh. No, not Van Gogh. Is it Van Gogh? Yes, it's Van Gogh.
It's. I think it is. There's another name coming to me.
Hold on. It is Van Gogh. And how do I not know this? It's literally tattooed on my butt. You think I know these things? There might be a Death Star in it, but hey, Vincent Van Gogh. Okay, that's what he intended. He was a dreamer. He was a notorious dreamer, like me. I'm not cutting off my ear or painting any awesome pictures, so I'm sorry. I'm not cool like that. But he was a dreamer, and this is what that allegedly was about.
You know, that actually has a medical basis too. Starry Night does. I didn't realize this until I was in pharmacy school that they mentioned this. So you know how the stars in that have like that like yellowish glow around them, like that halo effect. You get that whenever you have foxglove poisoning.
Oh, shit.
The digoxin is a derivative of that, like they use it for arrhythmias.
Yeah.
And Van Gogh was dosing foxglove for whatever reason at the time. So they think that he was having, toxicity from foxglove. And he was seeing, when he looked up at the night sky, he saw those halos around the stars. And that's why he was, that played into the look of Starry Night.
Yeah.
Just kind of an interesting medical fact about that.
Oh, well, he was in a asylum at the time, which, by the way, it looks like a fucking beautiful asylum. It looks like it's out in like the French countryside, although I don't know that that's exactly where it was at. But yeah, he had it said housed in a former monastery. Okay, that's why it's beautiful. St. Paul de Massol catered to the wealthy, and was less than half full when Van Gogh arrived, allowing him to occupy not only a second-story bedroom, but a ground floor room used only as a painting studio, which Vincent Van Gogh, as far as I knew, wasn't rich. But anyways, we're getting off the topic here. But yeah, he was at a quotation mark, an asylum when he did that.
Must be, well, it wouldn't be nice to be a tortured artist like that, but it must be nice to be able to just fuck off and then just do nothing but paint, while you're having your screaming at the wall and seeing things.
Yeah.
Whatever, but,
microdosing on foxtails. I'm just kidding.
The face on the dollar bill given to the mover for a tip, which speaking again about the visuals, that looks like a dollar bill. Like they did that well in making it have that cloth-like appearance. But anyways, the face on that is actually the director, Henry Selick. So a little bit of information. The leaves in the scene where Coraline is returning to the well were created by spraying popcorn pink and cutting it up into little pieces. Yes,
I did see that in the BTS. I was like, what the fuck?
The band They Might Be Giants, that's the band. I'm sorry, I spoke talking. They May Be Giants wrote 10 songs for the movie, but a change in tone from a musical to a darker production meant that all but 2 were cut. One when Coraline's other father sings along with piano, featuring John Linnell's voice, and the others during the end credits. The band, he has said that they will release the other songs created for the movie and other projects, including albums.
Wow.
So there you go. One crew member was hired specifically to knit miniature sweaters and other clothing for the puppet characters using knitting needles almost as thin as human hair.
Yeah, and they didn't even look like knitting needles. They honestly look like sewing needles, regular sewing needles.
Can you imagine the arthritis this person's going to have at some point in their life from knitting these little small sweaters with like basically needles, sewing needles. I don't, my hands hurt thinking about it.
Well, not even the sweaters. She also knitted the gloves.
Oh, gee.
Yes. So and it looked like, and thin as hair. I mean, I guess so. It looked like she was knitting with thread, needles and thread. I don't know how. They showed it too, and I'm like, how?
I mean, obviously, this was something she probably did. If it was like, nowadays, she would probably be doing it for Etsy or something like that. But that's just ridiculous. It has to be somebody who was, if that woman was older, God bless her. I imagine that's like something a young person would have it's like, I can do this. It's like, fine.
She was, I want to say, probably in her 30s when she was doing this, and who knows?
Well, that's still young enough.
Yeah.
You give her a few more, even 10 more years, she's going to be like, my hands are cramping up just a little bit.
Exactly. And I think she's just, she was a normal knitter in real life, but I don't know if they just asked her, like, hey, can you knit on the scale of, 100 times less than what you're already doing? She was like, yeah, okay, I got you.
Mr. Babinski is wearing the Russian Hero Medal for service at the Chernobyl nuclear disaster on April 26, 1986, which reads on the front, participant in the cleanup campaign. The 4A3C indicates Chernobylskaya nuclear power plant. This medal is unique as it is the only medal in the world awarded for participation in nuclear cleanup. This might explain his skin complexion and odd behavior.
Yep.
So when we say that and I didn't realize this. I only knew this because of the notes. That's the reason I listed him as Chernobyl cleanup guy. But, like, that's crazy that kind of detail's in the movie. Just saying.
Yeah.
At 1 hour and 40 minutes long, this was the longest stop motion film until Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio in 2022, which runs for 1 hour and 57 minutes. I've not seen that, so I can't speak on that one.
Yeah.
I have heard this, though. This is another thing, talking about Disney and their shit translations from animated to live action. By all accounts, Guillermo del Toro's Pinocchio is heads and, above, heads and shoulders above anything or that Disney movie that came out with, I believe, Tom Hanks as in the newest Pinocchio. They released Disney Plus. So
okay.
if you're going to watch a new Pinocchio, watch Guillermo's.
Okay.
It's better. The first stop motion animated film to be shot entirely in 3D, and the 3D is amazing in it. In the initial recording session, Dawn French played the role of Miss Spink, and just like I said, Jennifer Saunders played Miss Forcible. Selleck wasn't satisfied with the results, so he had them switch roles and re-record their parts.
Wow.
These sound recordings were used in the film, which might explain why the characters resemble the actress who did not provide the voice.
Yeah.
So they did base the character designs on the actors themselves, but those particular ones he swapped around because he liked them better the other way.
And by the way, this movie had absolutely no goddamn reason for having Forcible in pasties and a thong.
Oh my God. When it got to that scene, I was like, oh shit, I forgot.
Yes.
She's literally letting it all hang out.
Well, and then the first part of that play that Coraline sees, which is in the other world, Coraline goes to a show.
That's what Spink and Forcible call her is Caroline.
Caroline, I know. Well, everyone calls her Caroline. Spink, when she first shows up, is wearing a bustier and a mermaid tail. She's in a mermaid tail. And Coraline's like, oh my God, she's practically naked. And her and Wybie have a little giggle. And then Titties McGee comes out, Forcible. Her titties are a force to be reckoned with. They are ginormous. They're hanging out. She's a big woman in a tiny thong, and her boobies hanging out, and they're bouncing and everything. And I'm like, this film had no reason.
Listen, this isn't a slasher movie, so we're not giving it best boobs. But if we were,
it was Forcible.
Forcible's big old, titties would definitely be up there because they were way bigger than they needed to be for this movie.
Oh my God! And it's a kids film.
And the funny thing is, whenever they change back to their previous, younger selves, like during that same performance, neither one of them were that well endowed. Like,
no.
What did they get? Like implants later on? That's what it kind of hints at, but you don't really get that information. Or I know that they get bigger the more weight you put on.
But they held up real good, though.
Yeah, I think there was a hint there that they got some implants at some point in their lives.
Yeah, Spink, I think, might have been more natural because she was a big woman, and I think hers kind of fit the body.
Yeah.
But Forcible, she forcibled some plastic into her. For sure. And they like I said, because they moved, but they didn't move that much, and they didn't sag. And
no, you're talking about an old lady, and they should have been sagging, wrinkled. They were not.
No,
at all.
No. So, and I know it's it's a kid's film, and I know they're in the other world where things are supposed to be a little bit more perfect, but her body wasn't perfect, by any means. I think they represented women's bodies pretty well, if you ask me.
Well, I mean, yeah, even if you talk about the other mother, I mean, she had an ass for days, but like she didn't really have boobs, which I'm like, okay, that's a reasonable representation. I mean, that that can happen. So
you can't always get TNA, not without paying for one of them, Yeah. So it just kills me that this was in this film, and most of the time my kids didn't even notice it. They just slip it in there, and then the girls when they unzip these bodies, the old lady bodies get unzipped, and then the two younger versions of them come out, and they are completely covered. They're wearing like long john underwear.
Yeah, which is probably what they looked like back in their early burlesque days, because I mean, they could get by with less back in, when you think about their youth. So I mean, it makes sense. I mean, that they would be more covered for their earlier lives. And if I'm sitting there thinking, if anybody out there starts noticing this stuff more and it ruins your experience during Coraline, A, it shouldn't, and B, how were you avoiding seeing this shit? Like, I mean, I just don't, if you're an adult and you don't notice it, you're blind. I don't know what to tell you, but anyway.
Oh my, and then you're just sitting here laughing like a child. I don't even know how. I know my hubby just downloaded it for our daughter at some point, thinking, I don't know what he thought of this movie. I don't know what he had heard or whatnot, but we just one day had this movie and it became a classic in our house. So, and I just know that my daughter was like 1 or 2 years old watching titties bounce on a screen. So,
Since you mentioned how you got into this movie, How I got into it. I literally wasn't going to watch this movie at all whenever it first came out. And, I was, how many years ago now was that? 2009?
2009, yeah.
I mean, I was in my phase of like horror snob a little bit at that time in my 20s. And I saw this and I'm like, I like Nightmare. I don't need this shit. It's about a little girl. Who cares?
Yeah.
And my wife was like, I think it looks cool. We're going to go watch this. I'm like, all right, fine. And I started watching. I'm like, that's a pretty damn good movie. I agree with you. So actually, if it wasn't for my wife, I probably wouldn't have never gave this the time of day. So
same. If it weren't for the hubs just saying, hey, we own this movie now. And it's like, I guess we own this movie now, and the kids fucking loving it, and me watching it, being absolutely horrified, by the way, that my young children, my son wasn't even born, I don't think. He might have been by the time, so he was a baby by the time my daughter started watching this. But holy crap, being absolutely horrified. What the fuck is this? He's like, and they're just like, Coraline, like, no big deal. No big deal. Do you fucking see what's happening right now? I know it's not a horror, but the horror that lurks in this movie is terrifying.
Yeah, the thing is that like the true horror of the movie, like the neglected child and stuff like that, at least in a real world sense, I don't think kids get. They do. I mean, they get to see it because they know what it's like to be ignored by their parents, but I don't think they realize how dark that is until later whenever they become parents, and then they realize what's happening to the child. It's kids only get the superficial threat that kids always get, which is there's a monster that is trying to hurt me, and then and when you become an adult, that's why this movie is good. It ages with the audience. You start seeing the other evils in the movie that are like under the surface that only adults with our, like that we're like, oh shit, parents that don't pay attention. The parents are like broke. So, I mean, there's that, that real world, shit that you got to deal with. Like all this anxiety that you deal with as an adult that you never have as the kid starts showing itself in the movie the more you watch it. So.
Yeah.
Speaking of Caroline, Neil Gaiman was typing the name Caroline, but he made a mistake and it came out Coraline. Gaiman says, I looked at the word Coraline and knew it was someone's name. I wanted to know what happened to her, which inspired him to write the novel on which this was based. So the dude was literally typing another story, misspelled Caroline, and was like, you know what? I'm writing a book about Coraline since I wrote that name out.
Which is so funny because I'm looking at the keyboard right now and I'm like, there's no way you accidentally typed Coraline. A is on the opposite end of the keyboard than the O is. I'm not saying that it's not possible. If he was typing really quick, which I'm sure he does because he churns out a lot of stuff, then that's how it happened. Possibly. And granted, he was, at the time, he wrote it for his daughter, but it doesn't mean it was based on his daughter. Obviously, it was like something I want her to have something to read. Kind of write this book for her.
Speaking of that too, whenever I made up the notes for this, the autocorrect repeatedly told me that Coraline was not a word, and did you mean Caroline?
It was hella funny.
No, ignore. So there you go. The two members of the Ramped Brothers Moving Company that moves Coraline's family into their home are named for brothers Jerome and Joe Ramped. Both brothers did work on The Nightmare Before Christmas with the director Henry Selick. The mover at the front door who was given the $1 tip is modeled after Joe. So
that's hella funny.
Neil Gaiman has said that out of all the film and television adaptations of his books, Coraline is his favorite. Now, I don't know if that still stands given the fact that he was directly involved in the Sandman project that was on Netflix, but I would think it still does, because even if he's got a soft spot for the Sandman that he overly woked up for no, I mean, I'm just going to put it out there. Sandman, I mean, Neil Gaiman's always got progressive, stuff in his books.
Yeah.
And Sandman for its time, 90s, it was very progressive, but he decided that it wasn't progressive enough, and he overly progressified it, woked it up for, Netflix, and it ruined the story to a certain degree for a lot of people.
Yeah.
Coraline's perfect in the sense that it's got some of that stuff maybe in there if you want to go that route, but it's a classic story that doesn't other than the fact there's a flip phone in it, doesn't really and the technology of the dad's computer doesn't really tie to any certain time period. It's a classic in the sense that it's timeless, in the setting that they're in. The film Coraline was shot over the course of 18 months following 2 years of pre-production. So, and then you said they worked on it even longer than that, really, when it was said and done.
They count it from the time that Neil Gaiman was like, I want this turned into a movie, and tried for years, I think a year or two before he could even get someone to say yes. But it wasn't so much getting, because Henry Selick was on board. He was like, I want you to do this. Obviously, you did Nightmare, blah, blah, blah. But getting a studio that would do it. And
so, I mean, all those years of him trying to get it produced, and then whenever they did start making it, I mean, you're talking almost 4 years, to get this right. So that's a lot of work.
Yes.
That's the reason they don't really want to dive into a sequel, really.
Good God. I don't blame them. They said it just took them too goddamn long. Like, even when my kids went to this special viewing, I guess it was shown on screen, will there be a Coraline 2? And they're like, we're thinking we're not going to do this. It just took so long to perfect this, And,
I mean, it's a story that doesn't need, I mean, there's so many stories out there that don't need sequels that when they get them, it almost ruins the original movie, that I think they'd be better off avoiding it, to be perfectly honest with you.
I agree. I don't want, as amazing as Coraline was, I'll just rewatch it again. I don't think they should be doing that. They could potentially ruin it.
The only story that, I mean, one of the stories that I read, and it's only a sequel in the sense that the main character repeats between the two of them, and I would love if they ever get this made, and I hope Mike Flanagan does it because he's the big Stephen King person, is there's a fantasy novel that Stephen King did with Peter Straub, which is called The Talisman, and just like Coraline, it takes place in another fantasy world. Like, there's a main world where the main kid's mom is dying of cancer, and they're in this house like that's by the ocean or whatever, and he's just watching his mom like basically rot away from the cancer, and he goes into this alternate reality where the prince or the queen is dying of a mysterious illness, and she just happens to be the exact physical replica of it. It's almost like Coraline in that sense, that he's in this fantasy world where his mother's dying in that world, but he has a chance to save her in that world. And it's a great story, and there's like all this stuff in it, and it's one of the best Stephen King ever did. Of course, he had help from Peter Straub, but they made a sequel to it called Black House, which is many years later, and they took the main character, and I'm blanking on his name. It's Sawyer. I don't want to say it's Jack Sawyer. It's the main protagonist. He was a kid in the first book, but then he's like an adult who's like actually like an investigator, like a like a detective in Black House, which is the newest one. But that's one of those stories where like they took a perfect original story and they actually figured out a way to work it into a sequel. But it had all those years between where the character could grow up and become something different.
Yeah,
it's a lot of the times whenever you make these sequels where the main character is the one that you had at the beginning, and then like say Coraline, if the sequel is her just like a couple years removed from this one, they're either going to end up repeating themselves or there's going to be a little bit of the magic lost there somehow.
Oh, yeah.
I don't see it happening. So there
is theories that Coraline could potentially be the next Other Mother.
That's an interesting idea.
I'll go into that more towards the end.
Okay, so the model of the father himself, the regular father, was based on Ted Raimi. That's it, because John Hodgman is he's kind of he wears glasses just like the father does, but he's kind of heavy set. That does kind of strike me as that the father does have a Ted Raimi appearance to it
I agree with that.
You see that. The other mother is always humming one of the soundtrack songs while she cooks.
Oh shit!
That's a neat little thing they put
Creepy.
in there. At one point in the movie, Coraline shows 16 different expressions in the span of 35 seconds.
Fuck off! That must have been so tedious.
Facial combinations consist of 3D printed prototypes. New technology enabled a prototype to be modeled by computer, which was then hand painted by the modeling department. Each jaw replacement was clipped between Coraline's eyes, resulting in a visible line, which was later digitally removed frame by frame.
I wonder how they did that.
There were a total of 207,336 possible face combinations for the character.
I saw those other halves of the faces made. They had just a bunch of them, and I was like, how did they get that on there without the line showing, Yeah,
so that's where the computer technology helped them over, what they could get done in Nightmare Before Christmas.
Okay. Fucking flawless, though.
The other thing is the reason I say that, for all the praise that people give Mad God, a lot of the characters in that have like gas mask on because, like I said, it's a hellscape World War II. You don't have to worry as much about facial expressions.
Okay.
So, Coraline still has the edge when it comes to that.
Yeah.
This film marks the first time that a stop-motion animated morphing sequence was ever accomplished. This sequence runs for 130 frames or nearly 6 seconds. So, and that's where the other mother, morphs into the Beldam at that point. One of the scenes in the other mother's world takes place. All of the scenes in the other mother's world take place at night, even when Coraline visits during the daytime, like we said. So, near the end of the film, Coraline's father is seen reenacting the famous facehugger scene from Aliens using Coraline's stuffed squid.
Oh yeah,
or from Alien, I should say, not Aliens. The depth of the old well calculated from Coraline's pebble drop, and God bless you, internet nerds, for figuring this out. It's 116.8 meters or 381 feet. Somebody sat there and figured this up based upon the sound and and the velocity that's given in the movie. I don't know why you have this free time.
Yeah.
Thank you, I guess.
I hope you have a wife.
They probably don't.
Oh my God.
The painting in the living room that Coraline calls boring and that changes from the real world to the other world looks suspiciously like the work of artist Mark Ryden, who is known for bizarre imagery involving children. So,
oh, yeah. Isn't there a lot of controversy around that one? I'll have to look into that later.
Probably.
Yeah.
Many people have tried to decipher the meanings behind the lyrics of the haunting soundtrack to Coraline. In truth, although it sounds like some strange language, or French, which is also strange language, it is a lot of gibberish, words that mean nothing. So there you go.
It makes sense when I was looking for lyrics why I didn't find any.
It makes total sense in that sense. When Coraline sees her friends in her photo from Michigan, she exclaims, "My best trolls." The word troll is a common Michigan nickname for someone who lives in the Lower Peninsula. So there you For the character of Coraline, there were 28 different puppets of varying sizes. The main Coraline puppet stands 9.5 inches high. So that's a pretty big puppet. I mean, like you said, I mean, they had big backgrounds that they had these puppets in. So,
and she's not even the tallest character in the film.
No, she's not. Babinski might be.
Yeah.
Well, no, I would take the other mother when she turns into Beldam would be the tallest. But you got to think, I mean, to get that level of detail that they have in the images, they got to have bigger stuff because you can't get that. The smaller you go, the less detail you can put into it. So they had to have it a certain size to get all of that texture into the scene.
Well, and then to be able to move the character how they need to at the level they had the tables or the, sets put at, so that way it's more comfortable. Because if you're like 1 second, one movement, next second, another movement, and that's how you're doing this for a film that's an hour and 40 minutes long, it's going to be a long, you got some work set for you, You
got a long and boring, just move, click, click, move, click. 1,300 square feet of fake fur was applied to stand in for live and or dead grass in this movie.
Yeah, Jesus Christ.
1,300 square feet of fake fur.
That's a fucking $1 million home in California.
When Coraline first has dinner at her other mother's house and suggests playing hide and seek in the rain, lightning strikes. Through the window, a lightning bolt in the shape of the Beldam's true hand is visible. A little while later, when Coraline first goes to the actress's apartment, they read her tea leaves and see the hand once again.
Yes.
Miss Spink states that the hand means danger in the film.
Yeah, I love those details in this film.
A little bit of sound stuff. I mean, giving it credit for that. When that thunder hits, if you got a good sound system, that thunder really makes a sound.
Oh, yeah.
And I mean, I know this is dating our review slightly, but I just watched the Voyage of the Demeter that just came out in theaters, which is the Dracula story about the ship that transported him from Transylvania to England. You need to watch this in a theater. And the reason I say that is when that thunder because there's a lot of rainy, stormy scenes. When that thunder is like hitting, I mean, it's shaking the entire theater. It really adds to that movie a lot.
I don't know how people are saying that this can't be a great story. There's a very short scene in Bram Stoker's Dracula where you see him get shipped off and everyone on the ship dies. It's very short. It's maybe a minute, 2 minutes tops worth of a scene that they added in. And I always wanted to know what happened.
Well, it's dumb. It's a dumb statement for people to make because it's the perfect movie to make. I mean, even if you read the novel, it's just like they present in the movie where the guy, the constable who first, tells or goes to investigate the scene, discovers the captain's log, and that's how you get the background on what happened on the ship.
Yeah.
It's like a very short section of the novel, barely takes up any time. And it's like, I mean, and literally the way the book handles it is like, Dracula's transported. There's that little scene that kind of describes what the state of the ship was. And then we move on and we start dealing with, Van Helsing and the rest of it. Filling in that horrendous, scene for the crew of that ship is like the kind of movie that you want to make because you got the parameters of the story, set out for you. You know where it begins, you know where it ends. But you get all the luxury in the world to figure out how it goes in between.
Exactly. There's so much, and you got to remember back then, not a cruise, but like a voyage by ship took weeks, months. So there's a lot that can be done in that amount of time. Yeah,
I think it's a brilliant idea for a movie, and it's actually really well done. So I recommend people watch it. But that's neither here nor there. I'm just saying. Anyways, the lightning and thunder was. I mean, the thunder in this is another good sound design in the movie. When Coraline and Other Wybie go to see Other Spink and Other Forcible's performance, Other Spink's segment is based on Book 12 of the Odyssey when they encounter the sirens. Her backdrop is an image of the ship with Odysseus and his men. His men plugged their ears with beeswax so they would row and work without being lured by the siren song, while Odysseus commanded that they tie him to the mast but allow him to hear.
Oh, my God.
Appropriately, while Other Spink performs, Odysseus' eyes follow her. At the end, when Other Spink and Other Forcible crash into each other, he rolls his eyes before the backdrop collapses. That is a detail that is friggin' insane that they put into this movie.
Yeah, I didn't notice that at all.
You'll never notice it unless you're looking for it. Like,
Yeah.
it's just there. And something else, another texture thing about the movie. I love how that looks like a real play, like a backdrop in a play. Like, I mean, it looks like somebody, which they probably did, hand painted it, and they're moving it along like you would see if you were watching a play in person.
Well, clearly, Reverend, if you're paying attention, it was all the good boys in the film that were rolling the wheel to get those to move. And they were doing their damn best, so I don't want to hear anything about when it crashed down later.
What kind of dog is in this movie again?
Oh, God, it's some kind of terrier. I don't know if it's a Boston. No, it's not a Boston Terrier.
It's not a rat terrier because they don't look exactly like that, but you're right. It's some kind of terrier.
Hold on. I'm getting it right now. God, black shaggy terrier, but okay. Well, anyways, move forward.
Mrs. Spinks and Mrs. Forcible's doormat says no whistling in the house. This is appropriate for the actresses, as whistling in a theater is considered bad luck.
Oh, I did not know that. I thought it was because of the dogs.
Nope. You said that their houses or their apartment is a theater, or that's what it's imitating. Well, they live in a theater, so don't whistle in there. It's bad luck. There you go.
Oh my God. Okay, hold on. I'm almost at this point where I'm finding this dog. Scottish Terrier.
Yeah, that makes sense. Yeah, I was blanking on what type, but that is what it is. Okay. Yep. When Miss Spink and Miss Forcible are introduced, we see framed placards for the two that show for shows that they were in. The titles are Julius Sees Her and King Lear, meaning to leer at somebody. Both spoofs of Shakespearean titles with appropriate pictures that indicate they were likely burlesque actresses. Which, I mean, if you watch the movie and you have any kind of like if you're an adult, it's like they were out there with them boobies shaking and bending over quite a bit, and that's doing their thing as burlesque actresses.
Wow, and they're always wearing corsets still and everything. Like they still have the vibe going, It
kind of makes sense. I mean, the only modern burlesque actress that I can really think of is that Colby or Denise, or I can't remember her name. It's like Denise Colby Cushman or something like that. The lady that's on American Pickers, that's like their, like the tattooed, she's not bad looking, at least in the first seasons.
Yeah.
Lady who's like, over, like the purchases and stuff. She's actually a burlesque actress, and in addition to doing that for the American Pickers, and she's all about that life. Like kind of her social media is just her in like the burlesque outfits, like 24/7.
Oh, Dita Von Teese, who's in her 50s now, looking like she's a vampire.
Didn't she always look like a vampire though?
She did, but obviously, she's 80. Yeah, she's 50 years old, and the bitch does not look 50 years old, nor does she look like she's had any work done, because the shape of her face has changed, as it does as we get older. She's still looking fucking youthful and gorgeous, though.
That was Danielle Colby Cushman that I was thinking of, and then she's Danielle Colby now. She's apparently got divorced since then, so there you go. The crew, in a shot of Coraline on her parents' bed, there is a photo of her and them together in which her hair is brown rather than her usual blue, implying that the character of Coraline has dyed her hair that color.
Wait, what?
Coraline, there's a picture of Coraline with brown hair, so she's blue hair is like, her
okay.
trying to stand out.
That makes sense. Okay.
The crew spent 800 hours painting 250,000 pieces of popcorn pink on the outside, red on the kernel to stand in as blossoms for the nearly 70 trees.
Fucking genius. Who did that? Who was like, how are we going to make this blossoms? And someone was like, popcorn. Someone had a meeting. They had a meeting.
Just look at the numbers, though. 800 hours and 250,000 pieces to make that.
Oh, my God.
I mean, it's truly a labor of love for this movie. Okay. I mean,
think of how much longer it would have been if they had handmade the pieces, not just hand painted popcorn.
It would have been that much worse. But I mean, they got to have some kind of shortcut to get some of this stuff.
100%, and I think it's genius. I mean, like, I'm not talking shit at all. I'm like, wow, that's fucking impressive.
Of all the prominent plants seen in the other mother's beautiful garden are the same. All of them are the same as the seed packets that Coraline has aligned in the real world windowsill near the beginning of the movie, where she tells her mother that she wants things growing when her friends comes to visit.
Aww.
So another little, thing that you won't really notice. So just realize that whenever you see the other mother's garden, it's everything Coraline wants in the garden.
Yes. Also, because obviously, by the way, all these things can be seen through the eyes of the doll. We have not mentioned that yet. She gets that doll, and the other mother, that's how she spies on the children, is through the eyes of the doll.
That is true, yeah. And she has a doll for the parents that's been hid in the house that nobody knows about until the end of the movie.
And she even said the eyes are the window to the soul. So,
which makes you think if she's got a version of the neighbors and Wybie, then they have dolls somewhere in their apartments as well.
Quite possibly. Well, the grandma has a bunch of dolls, but I think the grandma kind of kept them locked away, allegedly. Yeah. So, but as we've seen in the real world, the Coraline doll moves on its own. Like, you don't see it move on its own, you just see it in a different spot.
Yeah, it's kind of got that Chucky before he does that great scene where he's like cursing and screaming and biting. It's moving a little bit, and you're like, wasn't that doll just over there a second ago?
On the table or whatever. I wanted to point out very briefly how the mom and the dad, well, the mom's an editor. The dad is writing the book. He's writing a book on gardening. Neither one of them garden.
They keep talking about how they're going to someday, but they haven't.
So they're writing this expert book on gardening, and neither one of them, not a day in their life.
But how realistic is that? I mean, there's like those self-help books, like that one guy that talked about negging, as it's, like he walking up to a woman and giving and like saying something negative about her in order to like stand out. Cause like his theory was that women get compliments to the point that they become numb to it. So when you give them a negative statement, it forces them to turn and like, what the fuck did you just say? Like that guy apparently had no game with women, and he came out with that book and like became like the the biggest thing ever because of it. So it's one of those things. Coraline's other father wears monkey slippers that resemble Monkey Bone from 2001, also directed by Henry Selick. Monkey Bone's a weird fucking movie.
Yes.
I do not care for that movie, but
I couldn't get into it, so I'm glad you said that.
It's one of Brendan Fraser's worst movies. It just really is. Anyways, Coraline has been made into a stage musical produced by MCC Theater in New York with music and lyrics by Stephen Merritt of the Magnetic Fields. That would be cool to see.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Beetlejuice has also got that kind of play. So anyways, the original sweater the design team had designed for Coraline's father sported a big maize and blue University of Michigan logo. However, producer Bill Mechanic decided to change the design in favor of his alma mater, Michigan State.
Makes sense.
When Coraline returns to the other world on the second night, she finds the other mother cooking dinner breakfast. The other mother cracks an egg, and the yolk is the head of Jack Skellington from The Nightmare Before Christmas, which Henry Selick also directed.
I did not fucking notice that.
I tried looking for it, and I forgot that it was the cooking scene. I kept thinking it was when she's washing the dishes, not realizing that that's, that was just her humming a tune at that point.
Yeah.
So I need to go back and read and see that. He also, if we mentioned this during Beetlejuice, but Jack Skellington's skull actually they're a precursor to him, appears in Beetlejuice whenever that carnival, whenever Beetlejuice comes into reality, and he's that carnival play or game or whatever that the two people from New York decide to play or whatever, and get slammed through the ceiling. The very first thing you see is a skull that ends up being Jack Skellington, later on. So he's been in numerous films that are not technically Nightmare Before Christmas.
Okay, I just sent it in the general death holler.
At different points in the film, Coraline is seen wearing a black baker boy hat with a symbol of a lotus flower on the front. In Greek mythology, the Lotus Eaters were a group of people that lived on an island dominated by a lotus tree. When the inhabitants ate lotuses, they would completely forget their home and loved ones and want only to stay with their fellow Lotus Eaters, a theme which the plot of the movie was built upon.
What the fuck?
Everything has a purpose.
Holy shit.
I mean, that's how you do it. That is how you do that type of thing. The Pink Palace's address bears the same numbers as the nondescript warehouse where the film was produced.
Yeah, Leica, and you can Google it now. It's Leica's address, which is fucking funny.
All right, now what are these other theories? Because that's I've got all the trivia out of the way. What are these other theories that you've heard about?
Okay, so a couple theories specifically about the cat. The theory started out that there was actually two cats, a good cat and a bad cat. And the good cat was the one that couldn't talk. And the bad cat was, and I think the good cat's name is Vermin because that's what the other mother calls it. And then the bad cat is the one that can talk. And the theory is that the bad cat is one of the children or the child, the son of the other mother. And that he helps her lure people into the other world because he got allegedly trapped in the other world, or he got put into the other world. And so she took herself to the other world through the well. She found a way through the well to get to the world to be with her son. And in order for her she's using witchy powers to kind of keep herself alive via souls of other children. So he helps her lure other kids. That's kind of a little bit of a far-fetched theory that's out there.
That sounds like the Wendy theory, although I love that theory of The Shining where Wendy is the crazy person.
Yeah.
You know, that's what that sounds like. It's plausible, but it's probably not the likely explanation.
Yeah.
You know?
Then the theory moves on that it's only one cat, but that it gets possessed by another spirit of sorts, because you could see a couple times in the movie, like, for instance, when he leaves the real world with Coraline into the throat or the tube, and you see his head shake, and all of a sudden he's talking. And the theory is that their job is to trick Coraline. Not so much. She has to choose to be there, and they have to do it by breaking down her spirit.
Okay.
So, and that's in the movie. That's not just a theory. That is a legit thing, is that she has to choose to be there. Which
in the movie, the way I view it is they're trying to entice her with, you know, like making the world the version or everything she wants.
Yes,
is what the other world is.
Yeah.
You know?
So by breaking down her trust in the real world, she's gonna choose to want to be in the other world. And so the other mother specifically, their job is to trick her. So when the cat is able to talk, when he's possessed by either the bad spirit or, you know, the child of the beldam or whatever, it's, even though it's quotation mark helping her, their goal in the end game is to trick her. Even when the beldam opens the door, knowing Coraline's probably going to escape through there, there's theorizing that it's part of the plan because it's not officially over. They just have to find another way to get to her. Because at the end of the movie, you got to remember that world only exists because the beldam is alive. And clearly the hand tries to get Coraline. Wybie kills the hand at the end of the movie. Sorry, guys. Spoiler alerts. And the key, which you see a few times, the cat's trying to stop Coraline from getting rid of it or whatever, but she throws it down the well, which is a portal, by the way, to the other world. So the other mother has the key now. So eventually she can get back to Coraline or at Coraline. That's the theory. And the reason why you know this is because the other world still exists, because we could see the cat teleport. He still has access to the other world. She's still alive.
Well, that is true, because they do show that scene where he teleports away at the end. So.
And it's not so much a theory, because if you think about it, when they're in the starry night dream, the kids still tell her she's still in danger and that it's not over.
Yeah, I mean, I don't have any problem with that. I feel like giving the cat, like, you know, this evil intent, or at least, you know, unintentionally evil intent whenever he's in the other world. I feel like that's a little far-fetched because it seems like he's the trickster that's working against the Beldam
Yes,
to me.
it really does. Because I watched it again and I'm like, I don't know. I just feel like he's working more against her than he is working with her. But then I can understand what they're saying. And they're like, well, yeah, he's got to get her to believe that he's helping her so that she opens up trust to him. Okay, great. One of the theories is that the good version of the cat is the dad. Okay, so he's Lovato. Is that not Lovato? Lavat or Lavar? What's the?
Are you talking about like the YB's people or
Yes.
whatever? Is that what you're talking about?
They're thinking that it's it's YB's great grandpa. They're saying
Lovat.
Yes,
Lovat.
He's the father to the grandma, the one who lost her twin sister. So he lost one of his daughters to this house. So they think the good spirit of that cat, or the cat in general, kind of like Thackeray Binks came back to save his sister. They're theorizing that Lovat came back to protect YB, which is why he's always around YB, and also prevent any kids from getting caught by the Beldam. That, to me, is more realistic.
I like that theory a lot better. That fits the movie as I watch it.
And they're saying a lot of people are theorizing that the voice is the voice of Mr. Lovat, in his real life.
That would make sense too, because Keith David's obviously African American. That would, play into the fact that would be his daughter.
Yes, which is funny because there's a deleted scene that the kids saw in which they ask Coraline asked YB if his grandma's black.
And in the movie when they show her, I don't get that she's like half black.
Yeah,
clearly she's got more color. Or darker in tone than like everybody else in the movie that's like a white person, but like she's not like the cat and like very dark skinned or anything. Like there's a difference there. Absolutely.
So and the kids were laughing about that, and I was like, I don't think that was meant to be anything racist. I think there was a reason behind that, because Coraline obviously sees one of the ghosts. One of the ghosts is colored. I mean, maybe not really, they're ghosts, but it's intention, or it's you can tell it's implied. And so I wonder if that's why she was asking the question. Now, they removed it from the movie for probably obvious reasons that it wouldn't be, I guess it could have been insensitive back then, 2009.
It wasn't the craziness with and people can get mad at this term. It is what it is now. The movement, whatever it started as, has been hijacked by, crazy people and went to way too far to the other side, to the point that it's actually racist. But the woke movement didn't really start until I want to say 2016, 2017 when it first started off. And then after that, it's just got progressively more ferocious, demented, however you want to say it, because they start out with the intention of trying to get more inclusivity and all that, which is not bad. That's not a bad goal, but they took it to the point of like, well, if your movie is all about white people, even though it's set like say in Britain during World War II, if you don't include so many people of a different race, you're not going to get to be the best Oscar, picture. We're going to, knock you out from all kinds of other things. I feel like that's taking it too far. That's limiting creativity to enforce inclusivity at that point. Yeah. The inclusivity should be, hand in hand with the creativity if you're going to make a good product, and not the other way around. So exactly. So yeah. So the theory keeps going on. Obviously, we've talked about the good cat, the bad cat, Mr. Lovat being the spirit of the cat, because that is an old lore that, cats are, if you will, like oh God, what is that called when you have almost like a spirit animal? A familiar.
Yeah. So basically it would make sense that, he would take on the form of something like that can survive through the years, etc. Okay, so we've gotten through what the cat may or may not be, who the cat may or may not be. The fact that if there is a bad version of the cat that is tricking Coraline, the cat that can go in and out of the universe, etc., is that the Coraline being in such danger is because now the Beldam has that key. We talked about the key going down the well. She can rebuild herself again. She can rebuild that world potentially, but that Coraline is going to be the next version of her. And that's why Coraline is in danger. Not because she's going to be kidnapped, but that the Beldam doesn't want to be the Beldam forever. It's a lot of work. Eventually, someone else is going to have to take the reins. And so that's another theory that's out there, too, is that Coraline could be. And I think it is something that Henry Selick had mentioned, but it doesn't sound like anything that no one's going to make progress or movement on.
Yeah, I mean, I wouldn't say that I can't see that being the case.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, but at the same time, it's not like it's not an automatic, like you watch the movie and it's an assumption you make. It's like, oh yeah, clearly she's going to be the other mother.
No,
or
not
has
at
the potential
all.
to be. I mean, it could go that way, but it's not like something that you're led into believing, you know, completely from the movie.
The whole theory is that everything was a trick led up to where it's at now, because they tricked her into thinking, oh, blah, blah, blah. But they also tricked her into thinking she got away. And that everything's good. She thinks that things are good. And at the end of the movie, when they're doing the garden is in the face of the beldam, versus in the other world, the garden is in the face of Coraline. So it's.
I didn't pay attention to that. That might be. Does it actually make the face?
Yes,
I mean,
it does.
Okay,
it's in the face of the beldam, which is weird because I didn't notice it before. I thought it was Coraline again. It's not. It is absolutely not Coraline. I didn't think it was the beldam at first. It's definitely a woman of sorts. So. But they're basically trying to let you know she's still alive multiple ways. Obviously, we saw the hand still moving. We saw the key go down the well. We saw the cat go into the other world. And then at the very, very end, one of the pans is of the beldam's face. So one way or another, regardless of which way it's supposed to go, Coraline's in trouble. That world is still active. And not only is it active, she's got the key versus she didn't have the key before. It was in the Pink Palace. And why would the grandma leave it there?
That's true. I mean, like if she, I mean, she was the one that obviously locked it away, knew her sister had been like, you know, stolen through that method.
Mm-hmm.
Why didn't she hide it? Why didn't she try to get rid of it? Maybe she felt like the beldam would reach out to whoever had the key, and so she wanted to be as far away from it as possible. And her thinking was if she locked it close to the area where it would be used at, but then like forbid any children from being there, that was the safest it would ever be, because inevitably if it was in her household with her grandchildren around, or if it was, then it would prompt them to be like, what's this key go to? And, you know, maybe that's what her thinking was.
Probably, yeah. Also, did you know that apartment was one half of another part of the apartment that was sealed up?
I didn't pay attention to that, but I mean, the fact that wall was sealed off, and they said that it was another room, and it can't be the Forcible and Spink's room because they're down below.
Yes.
And it can't be Babinski's because his is up above in the attic. So you're right. There's a whole other area of that's like closed off.
Yeah, so they're implying that is either potentially where the beldam lives, which would make sense because at the beginning of the film, she's sewing she's clearly in a room. So, and it's an old looking room with spider webs and everything. And I know she's supposed to be spider-like, but this just implies that the room hasn't been, quotation mark, lived in probably for decades, if not longer, you know?
You're saying all this stuff, and I wouldn't mind this being the case, but I feel like if they don't want to do it in the sense of making another Leica film, they make it like I don't want to say necessarily which company, Netflix, you know, Paramount, whoever, it'd be a TV series. Because if it's a live action TV series, you can give the story more room to breathe and bring out all these details. As opposed to, and even if you're going to do the sequel to it, you could do it that way, as opposed to like, you know, just doing a one-off movie.
Exactly.
Where you're constrained to like 2 hours, or 3 hours, as most of these fucking movies anymore are, which is too damn long for a movie to sit down. It just is, unless it's an epic movie that deserves it. So anyways, but if you make it a TV show, 45 minutes each, you know, run it for like 8 episodes, you can get the story that you need for that sort of thing.
Yeah, it's definitely, in my opinion, not movie worthy. And these are fan theories at the end of the day. So that you have to take it with a grain of salt. But the amount of hours people put into this, I'm like, holy crap. At least the person who did the pebble drop into the well had some real good basis to go off of, in my opinion.
I can just see somebody like a extreme fan of this, like, eventually Neil Gaiman, like he's aged, I mean, he's an older guy, but like he's, further along, he's kind of given up, on like writing a lot of stories, but he has one more in him. And like one of these crazy fans comes up to him and it's like, you've got to make Coraline 2.
Yeah.
Here's the ideas. And he looks at it and it sparks his imagination. And maybe he co-writes with one of them.
Yeah.
Like the sequel, or something.
Or even if it's an animated film versus a stop motion.
Yeah, they could get by with it'd be a lot easier to do animated film, especially if they do it with, and I sigh when I say this, computer graphics,
yes.
Instead of like hand-drawn animation, fine, that would
exactly.
work.
Yeah, so there's so much more, but the cat one fucking took me out. The Beldam wanting Coraline to replace her. Beldam actually being a good person and being controlled by the cat was one of them. And there was one scene where it shows her getting her face ripped off, and behind it they zoomed in and they lightened it up, and it looks like there's the face of a cat behind the Beldam, which is, again, far-fetched, but I was just dying at some of these fucking theories I was looking at.
It's just funny you say that because I saw this on TikTok and it just randomly popped in my For You page, only tangentially related, but like it was one of those things where it was talking about dark historical, like, superstitions and stuff like that. And they were talking about the bubonic plague and how it actually was made worse because of superstition, because they thought that the black cats, being linked to familiars, like you said earlier, were spreading the plague. And so they went about to eradicate black cats.
Aww.
And the black cats were the ones that were actually catching the rats
yes.
that had the fleas that were spreading the plague. So the plague got worse because they got rid of the one thing keeping the rat population down.
If they were... Yeah, the rats were spreading the fleas, but couldn't technically the cats spread them too?
They can potentially live that way, but by them killing the
yeah.
rats that primarily the fleas were living off of, they were at least keeping it in check to a certain degree. And they just made it so much worse by killing the black cats. And so, like years later, people got to realizing the benefits that cats, regardless if they're calico, black, whatever they are, can do as far as like keeping down pest population. And I mean, in particular, that's the reason they were brought to America, is because there was rats getting off the boats in such high numbers that they were like, fuck, somebody bring some cats in here to get rid of these damn things. That's literally why they're in this country. So I mean, eventually we figured that out, but like for the longest time, black cats were like given this negative name just because they were linked to witches. That's the only reason.
That's so funny. So yeah, that's it for my theory hour here.
But that plays into what you're saying with your theories, because he's a black cat, she's a witch.
Yeah.
He's familiar for her. That's what the fan theories are hinting at.
Yeah. Also, I mean, if you're going to go on the whole Lovat theory, he's a black man that inhabited a black cat and he's actually protecting.
Which goes along with modern theory about cats being protectors.
Yes. More than they are. So yeah.
I still prefer him being the Lovat.
I think that is way more believable, because there's only so much he can do, the limits. So in terms of tricking, it just seems so much more far-fetched. It felt like there was more helping than there was, anything else.
I just don't get the trickery, but I mean, if you want to go that route, and because, people do that thing about like, oh, you don't know cats, they're not like dogs. They're not completely trustworthy, that sort of thing. Whatever,
yeah. And the only time that the theory of there being two entities in one cat, meaning one takes over the other, is obviously the talking. Yes, he could be tricking when he's talking. He's telling her what the Beldam likes and whatever. But at one point, like if it's switching over, say this is where the good cat takes over, the scene where Coraline throws the cat at the Beldam and he freaks out, shakes his head, all of a sudden can't speak, and it can only make cat noises and starts scratching her face rampantly and gets the fuck out of there because he didn't know where the fuck he was or how he got there.
That makes sense. But in my mind, I can also see the other explanation for whenever he shakes his head, whenever he's traveling between worlds, in the sense that like there's enough magic in the world that he can find his voice 100% in that world.
He was still in that world when he attacked the Beldam, but it might have just been just enough to be, he was attacking her. The power wasn't there The power's with her. She provides the magic of the world.
It could be that. It could be the fact that he was just like, I mean, literally you're thrown at your enemy. Like,
yes.
I mean, he's right there. He's being attacked. Like it's him, like fight or flight. Human beings don't necessarily make coherent sentences when they're in situations like that.
That's true.
So, I mean.
So yeah, it was fun going down that rabbit hole though, for sure.
All that to say, all this long time that we've been recording, we love this movie.
Oh yeah, hands down. Watch the film, rewatch the film.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's a movie that on paper I shouldn't like at all, but they put so much care into it, so much detail, that if you can't appreciate the artistry, at least, even if you think the story is too kiddie or, like just too, I mean, there's just, it's not my thing or whatever, that's fine, but you can at least appreciate the artistry that was put into the movie.
Yes. So I want to also throw out there. So as of today, it is August 20th, and I'm going to definitely date the podcast, 2023. And Coraline, the reason why we're putting this out now is that they recently came out, Fathom hosted an event, and Coraline did really well. In a matter of 2 days, they made $5 million for an old film not old film, but 2009. They did so well. Fathom is going to be releasing another 2 days. It starts at 8 days. Hold on. Let me get those dates so I can throw it out there. So for anyone listening, if they're interested, I want to say it's in America only, and I apologize.
It's a 14-year-old movie, by the way, while you're looking that up.
Yeah.
So.
August 28th and August 29th of 2023. They are doing it again.
Are they doing it in 3D anywhere? Because if you can see it in 3D, I tell you, please watch it in 3D.
I'm going to go with, hold on, let me see. God, I hope so. I'm going to check another theater near me that they're doing it, that they were not doing it at, because there's one right next to my house. No, it's just XD. Where I'm at, but you can log on to fathom.com. We are not sponsored by them, but Fathom, if you're looking to sponsor a podcast, we're looking for sponsors. You can log on to fathom.com and you can enter in your zip code and it'll tell you, but it looks like right now it's just like an HD version of the film. I don't think it's 3D. If it isn't 3D, first off, I was not able to go to this. My kids were the only ones that went. I couldn't afford to go. It was just, I had passes with my Cinemark app. Cinemark, if you're looking to sponsor podcasts, we're looking for sponsors. And I had 2 free passes, so I used the passes for my kids to go and then never was able to buy my own. So I didn't get to experience it in the theater, and I'm not going to in the next couple days. I just can't do it. If it comes out in 3D, the whole family's going. We'll take out a loan.
Yeah, you need to. I mean, if they do offer it that way, that is the way to watch the movie. Unfortunately, I mean, with the 3D craze kind of over with, trying to be able to watch it at home in 3D is kind of, it's. I mean, you have to have a 3D TV, you have to have a 3D player, you have to have the 3D version of the movie, which they had in Blu-ray and they don't have in 4K now. So it's a whole thing.
Yeah. So good luck with that. Just got to hope it comes out in theaters. Maybe if we just hit up I'm like, hey, guys, we have this really awesome podcast and we would like to review it in 3D. And they'll be like, sure, just for you guys, just for Death Holler. And we're looking for sponsors for a podcast. So,
Yeah, we said this multiple times. Anybody wants to sponsor us, we'll be gladly taking your money and shilling whatever product you have.
But we're going to be honest.
Yeah, we'll be honest. We'll say, buy this item. It's not for us, but might be for you, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
If that's the case. But so the other podcast, what that you do with Daphne, what's that one?
Abso-fucking-lutely not.
And I heard the recent one that you all did, kind of got in all kinds of topics, ended on a very, very sad note.
Yeah, and I feel like that's our thing now. I feel like every podcast we've been ending on a pretty sad note yeah.
But I mean, it's had a lot of good things. I especially loved the coverage of, speaking of Disney, Rachel Zegler.
Oh, God.
the bomb that is going to be the live action Snow White. That's part of the reason why I've been on a tangent about how Disney can't do live action remakes of their because the main thing is that Disney has forgot what makes the originals classics.
Yeah, classic. Like, there's the term is right there. Classic. Classically, this is how it was.
If it's like if somebody was to do that, sequel to Coraline or a remake of it, live action remake, and the main actress that you had was like, I don't really like how Dakota Fanning represented Coraline, and I feel like it's not a good representation of girls and in particular women. So we're going to change all that. Coraline is going to be the boss of the situation. The other mother ain't going to be nothing.
Yeah,
and
the other mother's actually going to help her.
Or going to help her, and they're going to realize that the dad is going to be even more emasculated than he already was in the original movie because nobody needs a fucking man. We'll get rid of Babinski too. That can be a female part.
In fact, the dad might not even be in the film. It's Hollywood, baby.
Yeah, I mean, that's literally what Snow White's going to be like. So, I mean, and I just don't. And like hearing you all talk about Rachel, Zegler, which I keep wanting to call her Renee Zegler, but like that's Renee Zellweger that I'm confusing her with. But like, I mean, in the name sense, but like I just like the more that comes out about this chick, like the worse this whole thing is. And it was just hilarious hearing your all's take on that because I've heard plenty of guys make comment about her, and that's fine. But like hearing two women, have their complaints, it was nice to hear like the other side. So
yeah, the funny thing is now she's trying to say, why are people trying to talk about these old interviews I had? Bitch, they're not that old. They're like maybe
December of last year old.
I was going to say a year at
best. September, October last year is literally when they were from.
Yeah. So, okay. So we're almost at a year. That's not old, okay? Maybe you think it is in the term of digital sense?
In her defense, she's 20-something years old, and you know that when you're in your 20s, a year, like mental development is like, leaps and bounds. So maybe, I don't know.
Well, clearly she didn't have a publicist, but what the fuck was the other actress? Gal
Gadot.
Yeah, she wasn't helping the situation any, and it's like no respect, no regard at all.
This is a tangent, and I don't want to be on your podcast and ruin the dynamic, but that's the one thing I was going to throw in there is you all said she didn't have a publicist. I've heard arguments, and I think that's right, that actually she does have a publicist.
Oh God!
And that they were the ones that fed them that lines because, just like Gary Beekler says in Neurotic, like a lot of these people, like these actors and actresses, they're like blank slates, they literally that's why they can do so good acting. There's nothing there behind the eyes, not to mean they're idiots, but like they're so good at assuming personas in movies because they don't have like a defined personality themselves. And so like when they get out there for these red carpet events, their publicist or whoever, Disney, their handler, gets to them and says, make sure you mention the fact that she's a girl boss and she don't need no man. And that's all they parrot. That's all they say.
Your coworker scenes might get cut.
Yeah, and it's like, and make sure you mention something about if you have to wear that fucking dress that you better get paid for every hour that you wear it, whatever she said.
That's hella funny. So. Yeah, they're taking the film down before it even gets to come out, so.
So if that movie, if you, are listening to this, watching it, however, and whenever we re-release this again in the future, when we cover this during witch season, because we just determined off air, that's when we'll do it. Then, and Snow White was a smashing success for some damn reason, then I feel bad for you future folks, and I hope that some of you are fighting the resistance.
Yes.
And B, it's, we'll gladly, if the movie comes out and they change it's just Rachel Zegler being a dumbass and the movie has nothing to do with what they're saying, we'll gladly correct our statement on all this.
Oh, yeah, 100%. We'll own it.
But the images we're seeing are part and parcel with what she says. I mean, the 7 people from Seattle, Washington, that are, her, not even like her. They phrased it where they're not even like companions. They're like support people for Snow White, whatever they're doing in the movie, they look ridiculous. They
She
look
lives
like
with 7
people.
dudes. She lives with 7 dudes. At least with the 7 dwarves, it was more of a, if any one of them is banging her, it's more of a kink than anything, but it was more likely not happening. There were 7 older dwarves that were extending kindness to this girl. It was more believable.
It was almost like they were grandparents
Yes.
to her or something. And the fact that it was, she was helping them out by taking care of the household duties while they were away at work, doing, mining all day like they were. And they were supposed to be a different, species than her,
Yeah.
in the,
and what the fuck is Rachel Zegler doing? Like, fucking girl bossing? What are you doing? Selling some kind of MLM while they're out working? Is that how you're girl bossing? Because that's how I know all the women that stay at home girl boss.
Supposedly in the movie, I don't know, we're getting a tangent about this, and if anybody's pieced out by this point, hey, enjoy Coraline.
Yeah,
that's the whole point of this. But I've heard that that she made a statement that her father was a general, which I don't know why they introduced that, but Snow White's father was a general, so she's taking his her rightful place as his like heir or whatever. And I'm like, well, A, you don't inherit the position of a general. That's usually something you earn. And B, why does she need to lead a fucking army?
Yeah.
Like, I mean,
and let's get down to business to defeat the Hun, apparently. I don't know.
Several people have pointed this out. They already made this movie. It's called Snow White and the Huntsman. It has Charlize Theron as the queen. It has what's her name? Kristen Stewart from Twilight. Yes. She's Snow White in that. And there's still that discrepancy there where Charlize Theron is clearly much hotter.
What is up with the hot stepmoms being jealous of their ugly ass stepdaughters?
But whatever. I mean, if you remove that, I mean, they made Snow White like a girl boss, like leader of some kind of fight in that movie. So why does Disney need to remake that? I mean, that wasn't even like, I mean, that's stupid. Whatever. But
oh my God.
But I'm sure. What's your next episode? Since we're covering that, and that's technically what we got off on a tangent about. Have you have anything planned for next time?
We do, yes. Daphne has some things she wants to talk about. We're likely going to talk about the California hurricane, which, by the way, we're expecting a little bit of rain today, so we're excited out here. Love a good summer rain out in California. And so I'm pretty sure we'll talk about that and how all the Californians are reacting. There's no in between. Either some of them are panicking, which I think it's better to be on the safe side, especially when desert in the middle or rain in the middle of the desert just means mudslide central, especially out in there. And then there's the people that are just like, let's have a fucking party. Let's go to Disneyland because it's going to be empty.
Yeah, I don't understand that mentality. I mean, I do for Florida because Florida sees so many hurricanes.
Yeah.
They're used to it. They're numb to it. I don't understand that from California. It's like you are used to earthquakes, quote unquote, because I know you say that when it just your butt shakes a little bit. It's, but like they don't get hurricanes out there hardly ever. So I would think that they should be more on the cautious side. But whatever, people are people, and that's how it is.
I know we had a hurricane warning in 2011, I want to say. 8, 9, 10, 11. No, maybe it was 2012. I'm not sure. 11 or 12, whatever. And at the time, we had a neighbor downstairs. We were living in an apartment, and she had released cockroaches into the entire block we were living in. And the apartments caught on, and they're like, y'all got to bounce. This is what you got to do. We need to spray. We need to end this now. And it was getting bad. And we're like, sweet, let's take a vacation. Let's go to the Bay Area. This was before it became what it is today. And we had just found out the day before there's going to be a hurricane. And we're like, fuck, this is the Bay. Like, we could totally see that being a thing. And so the morning of, we're getting ready to leave. We ain't got nowhere to go at this point. And we're like, hey, so what's up out there? And they're like, oh, well, we called a few businesses to see if they were open, restaurants we wanted to visit and things. They're like, yeah, it's nice out here. It's a little windy. We got a little bit of rain, but everything's still popping and there's no sign of a hurricane. So we're still open until further notice. And I was like, fuck yeah. And we went towards the hurricane and had a vacation, and it was good. It was a nice one. Hardly anyone was out in the city. We had the city to ourselves. It was nice.
I mean, I can't say anything. We were technically in during COVID, no less, in 2020. We were in Florida at Disney whenever. I mean, good in the sense that we got any ride we wanted for basically 20 minutes or less wait. But
yeah.
In the sense that a lot of the restaurants were closed, so that meant that you were like, I mean, we got so sick of like the one food option that the Polynesian had where we were staying at the time that we started ordering pizza delivered to us. But like a small, like I think we got the edge of a hurricane that had hit like the Panhandle instead of, or like Pensacola, that, it didn't come around the one side. It came around the other side of Florida.
Yeah.
And we got the back end of that, which was like some really bad rain and stuff. So we were technically in a hurricane while we were down there in Florida, although it hit the other side of the coast away from Orlando. So we didn't get the full brunt of it.
See, so you get it, I guess, but you guys are kind of used to that potentially.
Not really, because we live in landlocked Kentucky.
Okay.
Which, I mean, the Appalachian Mountains protect us against all but rain and, a little bit of wind. So we don't have to deal with any of that shit. Now, if there's a fault line that runs through Kentucky that's supposed to be actually worse than the one that runs through that's San Andreas fault is, I think it's called the New Madrid fault. And I hope that thing never becomes active, because there's nobody here prepared for that if it does.
I mean, probably same for us out here. Maybe not to the degree that you guys have to go through. I don't know. It's just that we've been warned about so many things, and it's always some kind of joke. And I think Californians at this point are just like numb to it. Like, yeah. Wait, what? The devil's coming down here from Georgia? Oh, okay, cool. Like, we thought he already lived in LA,
So you're covering Hillary flying through. What else are you covering? Like anything besides that, like politically or anything like that?
I'm pretty sure. Let me see if I can hit up the page real quick to see what she has thrown in there. Although I may not be able to tell. Let me see. The Tonga eruption. There's some kind of underwater volcano eruption potentially. There's that, and then...
So you're saying there's some new islands that are going to be formed. We better be buying our property while we're at it.
Quite potentially. So, yeah. Anyways, so that's a few of the topics we have right now.
As far as this podcast goes, did we ever say, are we covering the rest of Chucky? Is that what we're doing next episode?
I have no fucking clue. Yeah, because I said we didn't have the rest of it, but you said, whoa, we have this and this. Then we talked about Pearl and X, and I'm like, I don't know what to do. I'm almost the point of saying Pearl and X, because it'd be easier for me to watch those than it would be to get all the Chuckies in before. I think I'd rather do that too. Let's settle it right now. Let's do Pearl and X. I haven't seen either one of them. I've heard great things about them, and I want something fresh.
Okay, if you end up liking Pearl, I will be both proud and surprised. I'm just going to say, because it is not your type of movie. I saw somebody complaining about it on Facebook recently. They said that they loved X, but they couldn't understand why people like Pearl. And I explained it to them in this situation or this sense. It is it's a character portrait, meaning that you are watching a movie about a person and their dreams, their mental, space that they're at, and you're watching them go on a collision course into, basically crazy town. So it's not one of those movies where you're going to get kills like every other second. You're with it to see Mia Goth just like slowly become crazier and crazier.
Yeah. And so I watch X first and then Pearl, right?
I would watch it in that order, because if you watch Pearl first, you're going to be like, fuck this, I'm not watching X.
Yeah.
If you watch X, you'll be like, because Pearl's in X. That's the link between them. So when you watch it and you're like, and you realize who Pearl is, then you get to see her backstory, why she turned out the way she is in X. That makes for a better movie.
Okay. Yeah. So that's the plan then.
And with that, folks, peace be with you.
And with your spirit.
Nande, City Trentolin, Pretty, Leleni, Sweetie Go, Meli swimming too. Twinkle,